Okay, I think we've probably got a good number of people on now, but just as a reminder, this is being recorded and will be available on the website after this. So, welcome everyone to the 8th Change Control webinar. Today we'll be talking about change request number 55, the M10 date shift. So, as a bit of a reminder about the purpose of this session, it is a webinar, so a broadcast rather than sort of an open discussion. Hannah will be sharing a Slido link, so if you have any questions for Lewis or about the general change request, that will go in the chat. I think Hannah's just shared it now, and please keep microphones off, as this is the only forum we'll be using for sort of raising questions. At the end of the day, this change request, the Q&A will stay open and it will be closed at the end of the day, and we will then share a document sort of summarising all the questions that have been raised and the answers on that. So to go over the agenda, we have Lewis here who will be presenting the amendments to M10 and the corresponding milestones. And then we'll also be talking about some of the supporting documents we put together to go through this change. So Lewis, if you're okay, we can have a look through.
Sounds good. Thank you, Will, and good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully this isn't new news to you all on the call. Many of you were on the dialogue session that we held last week and have been engaged through PSG, various advisory groups, and FTIG as well on this. So we've been doing our best over the last month or so to give people early line of sight of the kind of the direction of travel of the timeline changes. And indeed the content of the CR. So again, hopefully none of this is a surprise. So CR 55 was approved to go to impact assessment at Change Board on Wednesday. As Will mentioned, CR 55 covers the amendments to M10 and the corresponding milestones linked to M10. Fundamentally, in terms of the issue statement and the issue that M10 tries to, the CR tries to resolve, is that we know that SIT testing has been progressing slower than we had in the executed models, and the implications of that we've been monitoring for some time, and recognise that the implications of slower testing means that the M10 date, which is the technical go live really before the M11 start, which is the migration start, does need to move, and the corresponding milestones associated with that will need to move in accordance. So we need an extension of the SIT timelines, which are on the critical path, obviously, and feed into all of the subsequent cutover, service activation and qualification activities for our SIT participants. So all of those activities need to be extended, and that will obviously cause M10 to be extended as well. So we are looking at just over a 5-month delay to M10, moving from the original date of the 7th of the 3rd to now the 13th of August 2025. That also, as I mentioned, shifts M11, which is the start of migration, from the 4th of April 2025 to the 10th of September 2025. And the subsequent milestones, a couple of those are linked to the start of migration or to M10 themselves, will move as well. Fundamentally, as we have stated a few times over, we've aimed in the program plan to maintain the existing logic that is there currently. So where M10 has moved by 5 and a bit months, subsequently the corresponding windows of activity have also moved by that time. So if you look at the M16 date on the slide, you'll see that M16 has moved by around about 5.5 months too. I think that's it in terms of the description of change. In terms of next steps, obviously we will issue this CR out for impact assessment. We will issue this with all the corresponding documentation later on today. Some of it is already available on the collaboration base and on the website. The detailed program plan and milestone register will follow suit this afternoon, and the impact assessment window will formally open at 9 o'clock on Monday morning, and will close at 5 o'clock on the 4th of October. What I did want to do is just call out some guiding principles and give an example of some of the information we are looking for in our response to in your responses to the CR, so in your individual impact assessments. Fundamentally, we've identified 9 key guiding principles that we would like you to follow. So I'll run through those now. Firstly, that all responses to the questions within the change request form are evidence-based, specific, and have underlying justification and rationale. So, if you are making a statement, we would like to understand the rationale behind it, and we need to understand the underlying justification. Please be as specific as possible and as evidence-based as possible. Again, this will help us, and we've mentioned our engagement with Ofgem. This will help us in our conversations with Ofgem as we then seek to get the new plan approved. Guiding principle number 2, specifically on costs, Ofgem are very keen to understand the cost implications of moving the M10 date by 5 and a bit months. So please, can you include in the sections on cost your detailed cost breakdowns? This is essential, again, in getting any approval from Ofgem, as they have specifically asked to see the commercial impact of moving the timelines out. If in the change request you do disagree to either components of it or generally overall, please provide alternative options or recommended improvements that would enable your endorsement. That might be that you think timelines are too aggressive. It might be that you think timelines aren't aggressive enough. It might be specific to certain sections of the change request, but please ensure that you provide any recommendations, any alternative options, and we'll feed that into the final recommendation that makes its way to PSG in mid-October. Please refer to the planning assumptions made by the programme and they're captured in the supporting documentation. So there is a lot of information there available. So please use that as a guide. If you do have any questions or comments, you can contact the PMO. We are here to help, or you can contact myself directly, and we will help and support through this process. But please use that as a guide in your impact assessment responses. Again, tied to point 2, please quantify the impacts where possible, captured in your assessment. So when talking about a view of costs, please use a view in pounds. If you're talking about the number of service providers impacted when looking at implications on contracts, please kind of quote that as best possible. And again, when looking at FTE potentially around the impact on resourcing, please look to kind of state specifics on the numbers of FTE that you may need to keep around or extend or let go sooner. Again, please be clear in your rationale and reasoning when articulating whether you agree, disagree, or abstain. All of this will help us in our conversations with Ofgem. And then a key one to emphasise, Ofgem want to see industry buy-in and endorsement into the change. So if you say in section C.2 that you agree with the overall change request, we will take this as your endorsement of the change. So hopefully that's not a surprise to anyone and that is clear. But if you do, we wanted to call it out specifically. So if you say that you agree with that section, you agree with the overall change request, we will take that as your organisation's endorsement of the change. All impact assessments will be made public on the collaboration base. This is something we do already. And we do specifically remove anything marked confidential. So if there is information that you would like to mark as confidential or commercially sensitive, please do so. We'll make sure that is redacted, noting that all cost information included we treat as confidential anyway. So if there's ever anything on commercial cost implications, we will always remove that before that's uploaded to the collaboration base. And again, point 9, Ofgem have requested to see all of the impact assessment responses. So more of a call out than it is a guiding principle, but your response will be shared unredacted by the programme to Ofgem upon completion of the PSG recommendation obtained in ideally a month or so's time. Brilliant, thanks, Will. What we wanted to do then, so this is one of the slides in the pack that we've included and it's available on the collaboration base, is just provide a quick bit of guidance around one of the questions, and we've picked the effect on costs for this at the moment. So within the CR form, we've provided an overall statement that we think is reflective of the implication of this change. So hopefully that's not anything out of the blue there. It's what we normally do in the CR process. But effectively, we've said that the implications of this change will have. We expect an increase in costs on yourselves and on the program due to the need to extend your resources, extend potentially service providers, or extend any existing contracts in place. However, we believe the additional cost that to be incurred is necessary to achieve the program's outcomes and mitigate the cost of operational issues that would occur with untested systems if we, say, stuck to the date and went live. Noting that as well, we do think the program remains commercially viable and that the benefits driven off MHHS are not impacted significantly enough by this delay to, again, cause any kind of review there of the program's viability. I think everyone would agree with that. So what we would like from you is to tell us, in detail whether you agree, disagree, or abstain from responding to the statement, and again, add then your supporting details. So if you agree, state the assumption that the proposed change will cause X number of cost implications or decrease to your team and your program timelines. If you disagree, again, state why, and as mentioned, try to use as much information as possible, adding implications or cost implications using GBP. And if you're abstaining, again, the rationale for abstaining and why there is no, why you think there's no impact or implications on your program if that is indeed the reason for abstaining. So again, we've included a slide like this for each of the questions, hopefully just to add some guidance to yourselves when filling out the forms. But again, I think coming back to some of those guiding principles, the key thing here is the more information you can provide to us, the better. Whether that's in endorsement or whether that's in disagreement, and we will incorporate all of that feedback into the recommendation that goes to PSG, and it will help us really build the strong evidence base that we need to take to Ofgem as our sponsor to obtain their approval. So again, all I can ever stress as much as possible is please provide as much information as you can. I think, Will, that's it. We've got about 17 minutes where I'm happy to address any questions that we might have had through. Again, as Will mentioned, we'll keep the Q&A open until the end of the day, so you can submit those. And we are preparing a Q&A document off the back of the dialogue session last week as well for any unanswered questions that we received there. So is it, Will, back to you, or is it over to Hannah, perhaps to work through any questions?
Over to Hannah. So thanks, Lewis. Yeah, Hannah, has there been any questions that have come through in the Slido so far?
Thanks, both. Yes, we've had a few questions coming through. So we've got Ben Trassler is interested to know the impact to the upcoming readiness assessment schedule.
So the readiness assessments are all tied to subsequent milestones. So I think the next readiness assessment is readiness assessment 4, and that was preparation for qualification testing and readiness for migration. So that will move in accordance with the M10 milestone rather than proceeding and kicking off as it probably would have done actually around about now. So those readiness assessments, and the same with control points that are attached to specific milestones, will move with those milestones, and all of that information is outlined in the detailed program plan that will issue out in the next few hours.
Thanks, Lewis. We've had a question from Mike Winter saying that the plan is consistent shifting right by 5 months for all milestones. The migration window stays the same. The wave allocations for qualification remain as is. Do we start 5 months later?
Yes, correct. So as mentioned, M11, which was scheduled for April 2025, is now scheduled for September 2025. Qualification, which has a dependency on functional finishing, was originally scheduled to start in January 2025. That will now start in July 2025, and subsequently all of the activities underneath that will move as well. The migration window will remain 18 months, and the qualification cycle will remain at, I think it's around 14 months when you factor in the final governance off the end of it. And then the windows between all of those milestones, so between M14 and M15, for example, which is when the final qualification participants finish their qualification and would move into migration, that remains the same as well. So we've not constrained any windows of activity. They all remain the same. They have just moved by 5 months or so.
Thank you. Beth Tatton has mentioned that the M13 revised date is longer than 5.5 months. Is there a typo on the year and for milestone 14?
I will just go back and check that, but it should be aligned to the. If we can just go back maybe to that one and have a look. So M13 is aligned to M10. I think it always has been. So that will go. That would be the same duration. If I've understood that correctly. So it was always aligned to M10. So M13 still aligned to M10 and would take place on the 13th of the 8th.
Thank you. Another question: is it mandatory for all participants to respond to this change request based on the principles?
It is not mandatory for all participants to respond to impact assessments, no. However, we would encourage you to respond. We would encourage you to respond to get the as much information, as much evidence as possible to have a conversation with Ofgem about the proposed change. So it's not mandatory to respond to impact assessments, but we do highly encourage that on behalf of your organisations, you do respond. Again, it gives you an opportunity to have your view, to state your view, and have and get your opinion across. This change is a change that we all will own. It's the programme plan that we all will sign up to, and then we'll have to deliver. So this is an opportunity for yourselves to really feed into that, and get your point across, and ideally any recommendations or builds that you feel might not be in there that could enhance the plan. We can reflect in our recommendation to PSG. So whilst I would say it isn't mandatory to respond to your impact assessment, I'd really encourage you to do so.
Thank you. As this delay is due to SIT taking longer than expected, why have the durations of each qualification wave not been extended, and what is the contingency for any qualification delays?
So we haven't constrained any of the qualification windows. They still are as they are in the plan. All we've done is we've moved qualification by around about 5.5 months. The start of qualification testing for supplier and agents is directly dependent on SIT functional finishing. SIT functional finish has moved from the 3rd of January to now proposed to be the 14th of March. So as a result, the qualification window has moved in accordance with that. Sorry, the 14th of March is the 14th of March is the cycle 3 date. Factoring regression, it's the end of June. So the qualification date has moved with that. So that takes you to the middle of July with SIT functional finishing at the end of June. So we haven't constrained any of the windows. We haven't reduced any of the timelines. We haven't extended the qualification window. It remains as is, and as per the programme plan. It will just take place 6 months later.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure that's not my question, but I'm not sure that answers the question. Sorry, but I don't think it addresses the question. I think the nuance of the question is that SIT has taken demonstrably longer for minimal viable cohort, and that therefore, logically, I think the question is saying, why isn't QT duration extended accordingly? Because the implication is that QT participants may well experience exactly the same issues that SIT minimal viable cohort has. So it's not my question, but I don't think you've answered the question.
Okay, well, firstly, I'd remind you, Mike, this is a broadcast only, but I will address that question.
But you are taking questions, right?
Through Slido, yes. But I will answer that question and say that the scope and the scope of qualification testing is very different to the scope of SIT testing. The complexity, I believe, in qualification testing is different and is not as complex as the complexity in doing end-to-end SIT testing. So we believe that the timelines in the programme plan are still sufficient for you to complete your qualification testing as per the timelines. I appreciate your point that SIT testing has taken longer, and yeah, I take that on board. But the timelines in the programme plan we feel are sufficient for you to complete your qualification testing, as they're very different testing scopes and they're very different in the nature of their testing.
Thanks, Lewis. We've got a question from Sophie. Is there an expected level of granularity to be provided for cost implications? Would one value suffice to cover all impacted areas, for example, resource, contract, etc.?
Yeah, I think that's fine, as long as it's specifics. I think that's fine. So I don't think you need to break it down any more than that. But as long as we have a monetary value, I think that's the key. That's the key thing there.
Thanks. And then we have, in the event of responses across programme participants being a majority abstain, what steps will be taken to ensure a clear view is taken and a decision made?
We would need to understand the rationale behind the abstention fundamentally, and then look at that with the PSG counterparts and with yourselves as programme participants, and understand how we take that forward. So it'd really be dictated by what the abstention rationale was, which is why, again, if the plan is to abstain in your impact assessment, we'd really like to understand why and what is driving that lack of endorsement in the programme plan.
Thank you. Will there be a minimum number of impact assessments required to support decision making across all market roles?
No, there is not a minimum viable number, but again, emphasising we would like as many impact assessments as possible, because the more information we have, the more data points we have. So I would again massively encourage people to respond to these impact assessments, to the change request with their impact assessment.
Thank you. Lee Northall has asked, which submissions are due ahead of the new plan becoming baselined, and should we start using the new dates before Ofgem's decision?
So we will use, the plan is to use the new dates before Ofgem's decision. I think given we've just gone into the maintenance window, or we'll be going into the maintenance window between cycles 2 and 3 of systems integration testing as of Monday. The programme participants involved in SIT know what they need to do to get ready for cycle 3, and then we'll commence cycle 3. Qualification participants again know fundamentally what they are focusing on as they prepare for qualification testing to start. The plan would be, once we make the recommendation at PSG in circa 3 weeks to a month's time, that will become the interim position until we hear from Ofgem otherwise. So the plan would be that we would adopt the plan from that point which PSG makes the recommendation to Ofgem.
Thanks. And then, is there a firm line of what is happening with the Q&A migration envelope data cleanse deadlines? Are we submitting migration envelopes with no regard to CR55?
I think the plan for that one, we discussed this on the dialogue session, was to retain the current timelines for that activity, which I know is ongoing at the moment, because that will feed into future development of the migration approach. So those activities that are ongoing at the moment, and I think are due in the next few weeks, the plan will be to proceed with those as per the existing plan.
Thank you. For non-SIT suppliers, what is the expected impact on upcoming PIT?
So again, a lot of that detail will be included in the programme plan. It is issued in a couple of hours' time. Where activities fundamentally are either close to completion or should have been completed, we would aim to keep momentum going, and would be asking programme participants, to complete those activities in line with the plan. However, some of those activities that are due maybe in the next month or so will be replanned. to provide further time and a bit more flexibility. So we've tried to strike the balance between maintaining the momentum of the programme whilst also acknowledging that there is flexibility there now that the timeline has moved out, and more time can be given for programme participants to finalise their pit activities. So I think where there's activities that are close to completion, the guidance likely would be keep working on those and finalising them. But where those activities might be a few kind of months down the line, there's likely to be a little bit more time given, and there's a little bit more flexibility in those timelines.
Thanks. And then, can programme participants change the wave they are currently allocated to, for example, join an earlier wave?
I think that would be a discussion to have with the code bodies and the qualification team about the wave allocations. CR55 specifically wouldn't address that question. Our assumption at the moment is the waves and the durations of the waves remain the same. Any movement between waves for programme participants would need to be had with the qualification team directly.
Question from Sophie. What level of contingency has been applied to the proposed plan that accounts for other tasks to be completed not currently included, such as interim release uplifts?
Yeah, so there is no intention at the moment to have a significant interim release uplift. So the latest one, or the next one, is IR 8.3. That's the maintenance window we're about to go into. It's not anticipated at this point in time that an IR 9 is required. Any defect fixes that will be required through cycle 3 will be addressed through patching. And I think in the past, where we have needed potential design uplifts, we have looked at doing those in cycle. So if there are minor changes, we will look at potentially doing that in cycle. In terms of the contingency point, we believe this program timeline is ambitious, but also realistic and achievable. There is contingency in the timeline for activities to potentially move around if there is further time required for testing, or should something like an interim release be required. But again, it is an ambitious timeline, but we feel like we've struck the balance between ambition and realism with this duration here. So there is some contingency that can be created if required.
Thank you. And we have a question from Linda Christensen. How binding are these documents legally? Is it acknowledged these are completed in good faith?
Yes, it is absolutely acknowledged that these are completed in good faith. How binding are they legally? I don't think they're legally binding. I'll probably have to defer to one of my higher ups. I'll take that away and check it, but they're not legally binding documents. They are in good faith and will be treated as such. Obviously, like I said, we want them as much information as possible to be able to get the approval from Ofgem as in a month or so's time.
Thank you. Conscious of time, so maybe one more. Question from Sam Critchell. Can we confirm from the previous question that the finishing dates for milestone 13 and 14 are 2025 and not 2026 as per the slide?
Yes, they are 2025. So yeah, if they say 2026, then yes, it should be 2025. M13, I believe, is attached, like I said, to M10, so it should be 2025.
Thank you. We do have a few more questions, but I'm conscious of time. There might be ones for us to work on afterwards.
Cool. Well, what we'll do is we'll leave the Q&A open for the rest of the day, and we will issue a Q&A document early next week with all of those unanswered questions addressed. So I think in that case, given we are at time, I'll thank you all for your inputs and attention today. And as I mentioned, the final documentation will follow in the next few hours.